Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my updated 2024 U.S. Senate prediction. So today is June 16th. I know that it's been June for a while, and I'm sorry that I didn't get this video out sooner, or that I just haven't been uploading in general. I've been really busy, this last month or so, with things going on in my personal life, but um, you know now is the time, and I'm at a point where I can start making a lot more content for you guys. I have a lot more free time, and I have more of a determination to do some stuff, to make videos. And yeah, we're going to be talking about the Senate elections today. I think I made my last prediction last month in May. It was around the same time frame in the month. It was mid-May. And yeah, we're going to talk about each of these races, see where I think they are going to end up. So we'll start by taking a look at the map itself. You can see here that the Democrats are really defending a lot more territory than the Republicans. Out of the 34 seats, I think it is, that are up in 2024, including Nebraska's special election seat, there are two elections in Nebraska. Um, Democrats are defending 23 plus, which includes all of the three independents: Kirsten Sinema, Bernie Sanders, and Angus King. Um, while Republicans are defending just 10. This, map is pretty bad for the Democrats because they're defending red state incumbents like John Tester in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and Joe Manchin in West Virginia, which make it a very difficult map for them because with their slim, 51 seat majority, they can only afford to lose two if, they keep the president, or they can only afford to lose one if they are winning the presidency, which I do think is more likely than not. But if they don't, they can't afford to lose any because a Republican vice president would would give the GOP the majority in a 50-50 tie. But again, I think the Dems are favored in the presidential race. I think Biden would win against Trump or DeSantis at this point. Yes, you heard that right. I think DeSantis will lose now. I'll make an updated prediction between, DeSantis and Biden in, the near future. But even though Democrats have a pretty bad map going for them, the GOP is not in the best position to take the Senate, as they are not as they don't have as great of an advantage as I think they should. Does that mean they will win Senate control in 2024? I don't know. This is just my prediction. But yeah, I think Democrats have a better chance than conventional wisdom and the map would suggest. So let's get into the safe states for both parties, which will go to either party by over 15 points. We don't really need to worry about any of these states. I will talk about a couple of them because there are a lot of Democratic retirements that have been popping up, and we'll talk about New Mexico in a minute because that state was a likely state I had previously. But most of the Democratic retirements, come from these safe states. Dianne Feinstein is retiring in California. There's a very competitive, primary on the Democratic side to replace her. A Republican could advance to the general election, but I think right now it'll be between two Dems. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's going to go. It's going to vote blue. It just matters which Democrat gets in there. Ben Cardin is retiring in Maryland, and Tom Carper announced a couple weeks ago that he would be retiring, which does make the race give it the potential to fall into the likely column because Delaware is not necessarily the most blue state. Under certain circumstances, it can get a little bit more red. But looks like the Congresswoman Lisa Blunt Rochester is going to run and win that seat. In Maryland, it's a safe blue state. There's really not much contention there. And in Maine, Angus King, the independent, might retire, but it looks like he's going to run again. He says he intends to, and yeah, I think he'd win by over 15. The two states I'll point out here are New Jersey, Minnesota. Oh, and Amy Klobuchar will win by over, 15 in Minnesota. But New Mexico, Martin Heinrich is running for re-election, and really no one, he won, in a freeway race last time. I don't think he'll win by 24 points like he did last time, but I think, with Hispanics moving towards the incumbent president, or likely moving towards the incumbent President Biden, just as they moved, towards Obama in 2012 and Trump in 2020, and even before that with Bush in 2004. I think Heinrich, is going to outperform Biden, and I think that he can win by, just around 15. You can make the case for this being likely, but, you know, wanted to spice things up with the map. I think, last time my map was exactly the same, and I wanted to make a change. And, I think that this is one of those changes that will be, in this map. So, yeah, and in New Jersey, Bob Menendez is pretty unpopular, but he doesn't really seem to be getting much opposition from the GOP. It doesn't really seem like he's, getting, it doesn't really seem like he's going to have that tough of a race as he did in 2018. He only won by 11 in a blue wave year, so that suggests he could be vulnerable, but so far there really hasn't been anything, no major contender who could raise a lot of money and, make it under 15. It could be anyway, but, I think it makes sense to keep it as safe. Now for the Republicans, they have, not as many safe states because they're not, taking up as much of the map. But they have a good amount. Some of these states were held by Democrats in, 2018 or had competitive Senate races. Tennessee was an open GOP seat that was competitive. North Dakota and Indiana had Democratic incumbents. Indiana is the only Republican seat that has a retiring incumbent. Mike Braun's going to run for governor, but Jim Banks will almost certainly win the primary at this point unless something changes, and, the GOP will win the general election. So, with that said, there's some other states that I could talk about, like Utah with the, Mitt Romney primary, but I'm kind of trying to move along here. So, with that being said, or for the record, I do think that Romney will, win the primary. Anyways, I'm getting sidetracked. So, yeah, we are going to, now look at the 12 remaining states. We're going to go into the likely state category, or, a column of states, which will be states that vote for either party by around 5 to 15 points. They're not the most competitive, but they are not safe. They are worth, mentioning, and they're not, so solid that they, couldn't become competitive under certain circumstances. We'll start with the likely Republican states. The first one is Missouri. Josh Hawley is not the most, well liked incumbent. Missouri's going to reelect him no matter what, but he has a strong challenger in Lucas Coons, who ran for Senate in 2022. I think, considering Eric Schmidt, who was pretty much the best GOP nominee, who could have be put up, he was a lot better than Eric Greitens in that sense. The fact that he only won by 13, I think is, a sign that Missouri, yeah, they had a strong Democratic, the Democrats had a strong challenger, at that point, in 2022. But I think that right now, it is most likely going to be Holly is going to most likely win by less than 15 points. I'm sorry, there's something going on with the camera. I messed with it, so hopefully it looks okay. But yeah, I think Missouri going to vote for Holly. I just think it'll be like 12 or 13. He won't do too well in the St. Louis suburbs, but he will do better than he did in 2018 for obvious reasons because he doesn't have to run against a Democratic incumbent now. The next state for the Republicans that's likely is Florida, which, it shouldn't be too surprising. Florida is becoming a redder and redder state. Democrats did win the Jacksonville election or mayoral election last month, which was surprising, but Jacksonville's been moving to the left for a while. And while Rick Scott's not too popular, the Democrats really don't have, a lot of interest in Florida. There isn't really anyone, running so far. That can change. It's still pretty early on in the election cycle. We're still months away from the primaries, but, Stephanie Murphy, I think, would be the best candidate for Democrats, but I don't know if she's going to run. She seemed like she was going to run against Marco Rubio in 2022, and she didn't. So you never know. Florida could become lean. I think Scott will underperform Trump, in most circumstances. He'd underperform DeSantis in Florida for sure. But I think that he, with Florida's rightward trend and, him, it being Florida, I think it's gonna reelect Rick Scott. The Democrats, I really don't think should invest too much time unless they get a stellar candidate like Stephanie Murphy. Although there are a couple of interesting names out there, but Florida right now probably going to vote for Rick Scott by 5 to 6 points, maybe 7. The final likely state is actually, or for the GOP, is actually a Democratic held seat, and that is West Virginia. Now, West Virginia is a solid red state on the federal level, and it's becoming more and more Republican on the state level, but it has one Democratic senator, Joe Manchin. He's very moderate, very, pragmatic. He's pretty much the last red state Democrat. Well, he's that's not true by any means. We have a couple others on this map, but he's really the last blue dog, Democrat from West Virginia who is still, able to serve. We had people like Robert Byrd and Jay Rockefeller who served in the Senate, but they're gone now, and Manchin's the only one left. He was doing very, very well, and I forgot to put up the jacksonjude.com thing, so let me do that right now. But in, 2010, when Robert Byrd died and and Manchin ran for the seat when he was governor, he won by 10 points, a pretty, strong margin for, in a Republican wave year. In 2012, even though Mitt Romney won the state by over 25 points, Manchin won by 24. He only lost I think a couple of counties. But then in 2018, in a bluer environment, he was running against the Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, who wasn't the greatest candidate. He had a statewide elected position, but he Manchin still had a lot of things going for him. It was a blue wave year. He was the incumbent, and he voted to confirm Brett Kavanaugh, which was something that a lot of other red state Democrats did not do. And I think if Manchin did vote against confirming Kavanaugh, I think that would have, cost him his reelection. To be honest, I think that a lot of voters in West Virginia took note of that, and I think that as the race became more competitive as the cycle went on, that was something that people considered. But now in 2024, it's a presidential year. It's no longer a Democratic wave midterm. Even if Democrats do very well in 2024, Trump or DeSantis is still going to win, West Virginia by, 40 points, most likely. And even if Manchin overperforms by, 25 to 30, that's still a loss. And Republicans have strong, recruits, most notably Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia. Looks like he's going to win the GOP primary against Congressman Alex Mooney, although you never know what could happen. I think Mooney would also beat Manchin, but it would probably be, a single digit margin. I think Manchin has more of, there's a couple more question marks that come that pop up when Mooney's the nominee. I don't think he's as charismatic or as well acquainted with West Virginia as Jim Justice. He has his own issues, but Manchin, he'll overperform. He'll give it a strong showing. But I think either way, against either of his main GOP challengers, I think he just can't outrun the GOP tide that's going to come in and sweep West Virginia. So that is the first Republican pickup of the night. They're at 49 seats, which is where the GOP is in the Senate right now. But we're going to go to the likely Democratic states. First, there's Virginia. You could make this safe, but I think Tim Kaine, while he's a strong incumbent, is going to win by less than 15. If Hung Kao, the former Republican nominee against Jennifer Wexton last year, does run, that would make it like 12 to 13 points. I think if you're looking at some of the candidates who have already announced to be running in the Republican primary, none of them are too notable, and I could see Kane winning by over 15 in that case. But or if it's against Glenn Youngkin, I think Kane that's the one that Kane should really take the most. That's the challenger that he should take the most seriously. Even though I still think he'd beat him by a good amount, I think that it would be a single digit race, and it might be closer than the presidential. So Virginia right now likely could be safe like New Mexico, but I think Virginia and Missouri, both being likely states makes sense. I think that it'd be a little unfair to make Virginia and New Mexico safe blue, but only make Missouri likely red. So, this kind of balances out. Think it makes me feel a little bit more like my predictions are fair, but you never know what will happen. Either way, Virginia's going blue. And the other likely state, which, is more in the likely category per se, is Pennsylvania. Bob Casey is the Democratic incumbent here. He's very popular. Democrats have been doing very well in Pennsylvania for the last couple of years, but Casey has a strong history as the state treasurer and having won 3 terms in the Senate, each by pretty astounding margins. He outran Barack Obama in 2018. Did better than House Democrats in 2012, and beat Rick Santorum all the way back in 2006 by 17 points. I think it was an absurd margin, but it was partially due to the blue wave, but also because Casey was just such a strong candidate this will probably be his closest election yet. I think he wins by around 7 or 8 against David McCormick, who's probably going to be the GOP nominee now that Doug Mastriano has, bowed out. I thought, McCormick would win anyway against Mastriano, but you never know. That could have, been an interesting primary to watch. Either way, I think that Casey, is a pretty clear favorite as of right now, but it's Pennsylvania, and it will be competitive on the presidential level as well as on the Senate level, but much less so. So that is my deal with Pennsylvania. And now we have 7 states that will be either in the lean or toss-up category, or also called the tilt category. So the lean states will be, the next is the next, on the ranking, or the categories or columns of ratings. So lean means that a state will be determined by a margin of 1 to 5%. Sometimes I'll make a state tilt if it's below 2% because I'm not exactly sure where the margin will land. But again, my the point of this prediction is more to be accurate on the races than the margin. Either way, we're going to start off with the lean Democratic states. There are a couple. The first one is Michigan, and this is an open state, or an open seat. Debbie Stabenow, the longtime Democratic incumbent, is retiring. This is really the only competitive state that has a Democratic incumbent that is retiring. But Alyssa Slotkin, Alyssa Slotkin is, the congresswoman from Lansing. She looks like she is the front runner for the Democratic nomination. The GOP, on the other hand, has a long list of people that could run: Lisa McLean, Peter Meyer, Bill Huizenga, James Craig, and I think any of them would lose to Slotkin. Um, I think that right now Michigan is a pretty strong, pretty good lean Democratic state. Right now, I don't think it's completely out of the picture for Republicans, but they have really had lackluster results in Michigan over the last 2 years, especially last year, where they just got blown out in every statewide race. Gretchen Whitmer won by 11. The GOP lost the Attorney General or the Secretary of State race by 14. I mean, it was just really bad for them. Slotkin will probably win by 4 to 5. I think, a similar case with Joe Biden. But this state could be in the likely column if, Republicans really mess up in Michigan. The next lean Democratic state is Wisconsin. Wisconsin has gotten a lot better. There's been some good news for Democrats in Wisconsin recently. Not just that Tammy Baldwin, their incumbent, is running for re-election, which already gives them a pretty big boost in their Senate odds, but also because the strongest Republican challenger, her strongest Baldwin's strongest possible challenger on the Republican side, Mike Gallagher, has officially ruled out a run for the seat. Now, this isn't necessarily super surprising. I still thought Gallagher was going to run up until he, made his decision clear, but, there was some skepticism about whether or not he wanted, to, launch a statewide campaign. And it turns out he doesn't. So that leaves the Republicans with kind of a plan B candidate in Tom Tiffany, who will probably run now. He said that he wouldn't run if Gallagher got in the race, or at least he wouldn't want to, but now that Tiffany, you know, doesn't have to deal with that possibility anymore. I think that he'll probably be the GOP nominee. And, this state will be competitive, but I think Wisconsin right now, they've elected Tammy Baldwin to 2 Senate terms. First against a former governor, then against a state legislature or legislator. And in 2018, Baldwin had a very strong result, winning by 11 points. She won't win by that much this time. I think it'll be more, 2 or 3, maybe 4 points. She'll outrun Biden most likely. And I think that is where I stand on Wisconsin. I think that, probably a Baldwin versus Tiffany matchup, but I think Baldwin is going to win. If Republicans win Wisconsin on the presidential level, I might be more skeptical, but I still think she would eke it out. The final lean Democratic state is Nevada, which similar to Wisconsin and Michigan, is a state where Republicans really don't have a good bench of candidates. They have a couple that they could run. Rick Harrison, the TV personality. They have Jim Marchant, the former their former nominee for Secretary of State in 2022, who lost, by the most of, I think, any Republican candidate in Nevada in 2022. And they have a couple others. I think they have a former gubernatorial candidate, yada yada yada. But most of their main hitters, like, their best options like Adam Laxalt or Brian Sandoval have, ruled out a run. And, Jackie Rosen, is all in. She wants to run in this race. And while I think Nevada long term is trending away from Democrats, I think the Hispanic shifts in Clark County and in Las Vegas are a little, are more than concerning for them. But I think that in 2022, some of that, reversion towards Republicans had to do with turnout. I mean, Republicans had a Trump plus five electorate in Nevada, and they still barely won the governor's race and lost the Senate race. That's pretty embarrassing. And 2024 doesn't look like it's going to be a red wave year, at least not yet. If anything, it's probably, it's more likely to be a blue wave than a red wave, but I think it'll be, Democratic leaning. Nevada, I think right now votes for Jackie Rosen by, 2 to 3 points, could be a little bit more, but, Nevada's a pretty polarized state. I think that's why that's in a way hard for it to become too partisan, but also it's hard for it to, stray away from Republicans or from Democrats, excuse me. I think that, Rosen probably her most likely the likely GOP nominee right now is Jim Marchin, and he's probably one of the GOP's worst options. So I think Jackie Rosen wins as of right now. Um, and our final, our final lean state in general, the lone lean Republican state, is Texas. I could see why people are more skeptical of Texas going blue after, Democrats did really bad there in the midterms. But let's remember that, Texas was also a bad state with, was another bad state for Democratic turnout. And Greg Abbott, was running on on a local level against Beto O'Rourke and not a federal level. Ted Cruz is a lot less popular than Greg Abbott. Say what you will about Abbott, but he seems to, stay in good graces for the most part with suburban Texans. Make of that what you will, but that's kind of matter of fact. Um, Colin Allred, the Democratic congressman from Dallas, has announced that he's going to run against Cruz. I think that he is a pretty strong candidate. I think right now he's the presumptive nominee. I think for a while I thought it might be one of the Castro brothers. I think it could be for some reason if Beto decides to come back, I think he would obviously get it, and if he runs for Senate again. But I think Democrats in Texas are looking for their new main man. And I think Colin Allred, if anyone, would be the guy to beat Ted Cruz. I think he's got good suburban appeal. He is, down to earth. I think that he is a very strong candidate. But with Texas, still leaning Republican and, having, Hispanic shifts in the Rio Grande Valley towards Republicans long term will hurt Democrats here for a while. Eventually, Texas will flip blue. Um, but I think right now it's a little too soon. I think, you know, Colin Allred could win this race, but if he does, I want to see some more evidence before, I go towards, before I predict that. I think Ted Cruz right now is the favorite in Texas's Senate race. And now we have three toss-up states: Arizona, Montana, and Ohio. All three, two of which are held by Democrats. I mean, technically all three, but Kirsten Sinema is an independent. We'll start with Arizona. I think Ruben Gallego is still favored in a freeway race and in a two-way race. In the state, I think that Kirsten Sinema could certainly split the vote with Gallego to the point where a Republican, even if they're pretty extreme like Carrie Lake or Andy Biggs, Blake Masters, I think there is a possibility that a Trump-like candidate could win Arizona in a freeway race. But I think Gallego is still doing really well with, he seems to have a lot more appeal with independents than we thought. It seems like Sinema is just generally pulling away votes from both Democrats and Republicans, and even then, it's not a whole lot. If you look at polling data, it's probably less than polling data suggests because, polls in general overestimate independent support. Look at Oregon's governor's race last year. Um, but I think that Sinema right now is in a lot of trouble. We don't know if she's going to run for re-election. I think she will. Her party switch in December of last year kind of indicated that it was it was a politically savvy move at the time, but it doesn't really seem to be helping her out. It seems like Gallego is being able to get around that, but again, polls can be misleading, and there's still a long ways out. The GOP just doesn't seem to have a strong candidate, and Gallego seems to be doing just fine with the people, with the voters of Arizona. So I think right now he's the favorite. Then we go to Ohio. Now, I think Ohio is a really tough state because Sherrod Brown is a very good incumbent for the Democrats. He has won 3 terms. He's very, very good at what he does. He is he's the man who, if there's any Democrat who can win in Ohio, it's Sherrod Brown, and he has. But in 2018, he was going up against a very, very poor, very, very underfunded candidate, and he underperformed. He was supposed to win by 11 to 12. You can see here he only won by 7 against Jim Renacci. I think that in a more Republican environment, even if it's not a red wave, in a presidential environment, against a strong-ish candidate like Frank LaRose or Matt Dolan, I think that Brown loses. I think if we're talking more Bernie Moreno-esque or, J.R. Majewski, even though he's likely not going to run, but, just imagine that. I think Brown, could win. I think Republicans need to be, more careful with, who they nominate for this Senate seat, because J.D. Vance, while he was a bad candidate, and while Tim Ryan was a really good one, Tim Ryan was not the incumbent. Sherrod Brown is a million times more electable than Tim Ryan, not to take away from, the former congressman, but, Brown just has more appeal. So I think that, candidate quality matters more in this race. Someone like Moreno, who's, very controversial, I think um, you know, really, would lose to Brown. Even if even if Brown kind of, is struggling, like he would, like you presume he would in a presidential year. With Trump or DeSantis winning, winning Ohio by a good amount. But I think right now, leaning towards Frank LaRose likely being the GOP nominee, even though he hasn't announced his candidacy yet. It seems like he's going to. I think that Sherrod Brown narrowly goes down in Ohio, and that gives the GOP the majority, 51 seats, but we're not done yet. We have to talk about Montana. Montana is interesting. It's the last of these free red state. It's the last of these free red states with a Democratic senator. Um, and I think that John Tester is a very strong incumbent. He has proven that, unlike Joe Manchin, he has, maintained a pretty consistent level of support. Sherrod Brown has as well, but, that not quite as consistent. And I think that Tester right now really doesn't have any, of all the GOP challengers that could run against him, the one that I think has the best chance of beating him is Austin Knudsen, the Attorney General of Montana. But in terms of name recognition, you see people like Matt Rosendale, who was the GOP nominee against him in 2018. You have Ryan Zinke, the current representative, and you have Tim Sheehy, this CEO of this aircraft company, I believe. All 3 of them seem to be the most likely to take on Tester. I think Sheehy would be the best out of the 3, but none of them really strike me as someone who can, really beat Tester. I think Tester is very much underrated in his ability to beat polarization. And I think that while he could lose, considering Montana is a pretty red state and it's a presidential year, I think right now I would call him the favorite against, most of these candidates. I think right now Rosendale's the most likely nominee, but it also could be Ryan Zinke or, Tim Sheehy. And, maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe, in a year and a half, Tester will lose and Republicans will finally have 2, Senate seats in Montana. But I think right now I would go with John Tester to win re-election by, a hair. So now that we are finished, we can look at the totals. Republicans win 51 seats, Democrats win 49. This has been my prediction, in terms of, the overall Senate makeup for a while now. Republicans flip Ohio and West Virginia and hold on to every single one of their current seats, while Democrats hold on to competitive seats like Arizona, Nevada, Montana, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So right now, I do think the GOP will win the majority, even if they lose. This is assuming that Biden or Biden faces Trump or DeSantis, who I think he would beat. Both of whom I think he would beat on the presidential level, and I currently think Democrats are going to win the House, but the Senate's just a little bit tricky for them. They have to do something in Ohio or Texas or both. They have to, try in West Virginia, although that one is a lot more tricky than the other 2. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Sorry that it was really long and sorry that it was delayed, but I'm going to try to make more videos soon. I'm glad that I got that I had the chance to get this prediction out. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Share this video with someone who you think would enjoy it. And check out my non-political channel, Interactive127, if you're interested, in some, coverage of the Marvel Spider-Man 2 game, which will be coming out soon. That is something that I've been meaning to do. And yeah, check out my comrades channel, Growling Zeus 666, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya.